The crystal chandeliers of the Bellacourt ballroom dripped light, scattering diamonds across the polished marble floor. It felt like walking on stars. If stars were cold and unforgiving, I clutched my small evening bag, the crimson silk of my dress a slash of defiance against the room's muted gold and cream palette. I had spent 2 hours getting ready, sharpening my edges until I felt lethal. Confidence was armor, and tonight I needed plates of steel. This was Cameron's night, his party, and by extension it was supposed to be our night, a celebration of his latest political maneuvering, his ascent. But he had been distant for 3 weeks, and the invitation had arrived via his secretary, not from his own hand. A chill had settled in my bones then, a premonition that tonight was not a celebration, but a reckoning. I saw him across the room, holding court near the towering ice sculpture of a swan, Cameron Price. Even his name sounded like money and ambition. He was laughing, the perfect camera-ready laugh that showed just the right amount of white teeth. His tuxedo was tailored to perfection, his blonde hair catching the light like a halo. He looked every bit the rising star of Manhattan politics. He looked like the man I had inexplicably fallen for, the man I had planned a future with. My heels clicked, a sharp, angry sound in the low hum of conversation. As I got closer, the crowd around him seemed to sense my approach. Conversations paused, heads turned. This was the moment. The air grew thick and heavy, the bright lights of the ballroom suddenly feeling like an interrogation lamp. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. He finally looked up, his smile faltering for just a fraction of a second when he saw me. When he saw the red dress, he knew what this dress meant. I wore it the night we first met, the night I thought I had found something real in this city of facades. "Alyssa," he said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. He stepped forward, taking my hands. His touch was cold. "You look stunning. Red was always your color." "Cameron," I replied, keeping my voice even. "It is quite the party. You have certainly outdone yourself." "I always do," he said, that smile snapping back into place. It did not reach his eyes. "I'm so glad you could make it. There is someone I want you to meet." He turned slightly, gesturing to the woman standing just behind his shoulder, partially obscured. She stepped forward into the light. She was young, maybe 22, with soft blonde hair and a pale blue dress that made her look innocent, ethereal. She was everything I was not. She was the soft watercolor to my sharp oil painting. "Alyssa, this is Sophia," Cameron said, his voice brimming with a sickening, manufactured warmth. He slid his arm around her waist, pulling her possessively against his side. "Sophia, this is Alyssa Price, an old friend." An old friend? The words hit me like a physical slap. Not his fiancée, not the woman who had proofread his speeches, who had redesigned his townhouse, who had slept in his bed for 2 years. An old friend. My breath caught. The room tilted. The curious stares of the onlookers turned to pity, to thinly veiled amusement. I saw it all. I saw the whispers starting, the phones being discreetly raised. I was the center of a spectacle. My humiliation was the evening's entertainment. Sophia smiled, a shy, tentative thing. "It is so wonderful to finally meet you. Alyssa, Cameron has told me, well, he has mentioned you." I looked at Cameron, my eyes burning. Has he? My voice was dangerously quiet. "What exactly did he tell you? Sophia." Cameron's grip on her waist tightened. "Alyssa, please, let us not make a scene." "Make a scene," I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You invited me to your party. Cameron, a party that is very clearly—" I gestured to the way he was holding her. "An announcement, nay? You did not even have the decency to tell me. You let me walk in here, dressed like this, thinking this was for us. Our relationship ran its course. Alyssa, you knew that," he hissed, his blue eyes turning to ice. "We were not right for each other. I need someone who supports my goals, someone who fits the life I am building." "And I did not fit," I demanded, my voice rising despite my best efforts to control it. Was I too much for you? Cameron, too much ambition? Did my blueprints get in the way of your political ones? You were too difficult, Nay, he snapped, his mask of civility dropping. You were always challenging, always questioning. Sophia, she understands. She's gentle. She is malleable, I shot back. She is a prop, just like I was, only she is a newer model. Sophia gasped, her eyes filling with tears. Cameron's face flushed with anger. That is enough. You're embarrassing yourself. I am. I looked around at the silent, watching crowd. No, Cameron, you are embarrassing me. You brought me here to publicly discard me. You wanted a show. You wanted everyone to see you choosing her over me. You wanted to break me right here, in front of everyone. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. The string quartet had stopped playing. The only sound was the faint clinking of ice in abandoned glasses. My chest ached, the steel armor I had worn cracking to reveal the raw, vulnerable mess beneath. He had won. He had utterly, completely destroyed me. And then the heavy oak doors at the far end of the ballroom opened. It was not a loud entrance, but the shift in the room's atmosphere was instantaneous. The air pressure dropped. The respectful hush that had fallen for Cameron's drama was nothing compared to this. This was a silence born of fear. A man walked in. He was tall, broader than Cameron, and moved with a grace that was almost predatory. He wore a black suit, so exquisitely cut it must have cost more than my car. His hair was dark, his face a collection of harsh, handsome angles. He looked like a fallen angel, one who had thoroughly enjoyed the fall. I knew who he was. Everyone in New York knew who he was. Thomas D'Angelo. The name was spoken only in whispers, linked to every shadow operation in the city. He was the king of the underworld, a man who built empires and buried secrets. He had no place at a political fundraiser. He did not look at Cameron. He did not look at anyone. His eyes, dark and unreadable, found mine across the room. They held me captive. He moved, not hurriedly, but with a terrifying, unswerving purpose. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea, people practically scrambling to get out of his path. He walked directly toward the ice swan, directly toward our pathetic little triangle of broken hearts and broken promises. He stopped less than a foot from me. He was so close I could smell the faint, expensive scent of him, something like sandalwood and iron. He looked down at me, his expression impassive, but his eyes were electric. They saw everything. They saw my broken pride, my fury, my desperate attempt to hold myself together. He looked at Cameron. His gaze was flat, dismissive. It was the look one gives an insect before crushing it. Cameron, for all his bluster, visibly paled. He took an involuntary step back, his hand falling from Sophia's waist. Thomas D'Angelo turned his full attention back to me. His voice was deep, a low rumble that vibrated through my bones. It cut through the silence of the ballroom. Alyssa Price. He said my name like it was an invocation. He reached into his jacket pocket. He did not ask. He did not plead. He stated a fact, a decree that rearranged the stars. You will be my wife. Time stopped. My brain simply ceased to function. I heard a collective gasp from the room. I saw Cameron's jaw drop, his face a mask of disbelief, and, beneath that, a flicker of pure panic. Before I could find my voice, before I could even breathe, Thomas D'Angelo took my left hand. His touch was firm, warm, and absolute. He slid a ring onto my fourth finger. It was not a delicate engagement ring. It was a fortress, a diamond the size of a small iceberg, square-cut, flanked by two more enormous stones. It was impossibly heavy, cold, and blindingly brilliant. It was a shackle, a crown, a declaration of war. It covered the pale indent where Cameron's much smaller, much more sensible ring used to be. He lifted my hand, his thumb brushing over the massive stone, settling it into place on my finger. He looked directly into my eyes, the world outside of him, outside of this impossible, insane moment, faded to a dull roar. "You will be my waifu," he said again, softer this time, but no less final. The silence broke. 100 camera flashes went off at once, the sound like a round of gunfire. The reporters Cameron had invited to document his new love story now had a much bigger headline. The whispers erupted into a wave of sound, a cacophony of shock and speculation. I stared at the diamond, a star burst of light on my hand. I looked up at the dangerous, beautiful stranger who had just claimed me in front of New York's elite. My humiliation was gone, vaporized. In its place was something else, something terrifying and wild. Thomas D'Angelo did not release my hand. He kept it firmly in his, turning us both to face the stunned, flashing crowd. He had not saved me. He had just thrown me from one fire into another, infinitely more complex and dangerous. And as I stood there, with his ring on my finger and his presence like a shield at my side, I realized I did not care. The only thing that mattered was the look of utter ruin on Cameron Price's face. The weight of the diamond on my finger was impossibly heavy, a cold, solid anchor in the swirling chaos of the ballroom. Flashes still popped, illuminating the shocked faces of the crowd, the pale, furious mask of Cameron, and the utterly impassive profile of the man beside me. Thomas D'Angelo. His name echoed in my head, a drumbeat of legend and fear. How did I get here? How did Alyssa Price, senior architect, a woman who built foundations, end up standing on a fault line of her own making? It all started, as so many New York stories do, with ambition. Not for power, not for fame, but for steel and glass. I came to Manhattan with a degree, a portfolio, and a burning desire to leave my mark on the skyline. I loved the skeleton of a building, the logic of a blueprint, the way a structure could defy gravity and capture light. I was good at it. I worked hard, pulling 70-hour weeks at one of the city's top firms. I earned my promotion. I earned my corner office with its view of the park. My life was my own, built to my own specifications. And then I met Cameron Price. It was at a charity gala for the preservation of historic buildings. Ironically enough, when he was charming, golden, he listened, truly listened. When I talked about load-bearing walls and cantilevered design, he seemed fascinated by my passion. He was the city's darling, a young politician climbing the ranks with startling speed. He was everything Manhattan adored: handsome, well-educated, and hungry. Our relationship was a whirlwind. We were the perfect couple, or so the society pages told me. His sharp political mind, my creative vision. We were invited everywhere. I found myself in rooms I had only read about, shaking hands with senators and billionaires. Cameron loved having me on his arm. I was his brilliant fiancée, the woman with brains and beauty. He would ask my opinion on urban development projects, and I, naive, gave it freely. I thought he valued my expertise. I did not realize, not for a long time, that my insights were just another asset for him to trade, another piece of leverage in his backroom deals. The unease started as a whisper, a quiet, nagging doubt. He began to suggest I pull back from certain projects. "It does not look right, Alyssa," he would say, his voice reasonable. "The optics are bad. That developer is complicated." Complicated, I soon learned, meant they were not one of his donors. My world, once so clear and defined by my own work, was becoming murky, filtered through the lens of his ambition. I was a prop, an accessory he used to round out his image, the intelligent, independent partner. It was all a lie. I wanted a life built on solid ground, not on shifting political sands. I wanted to be known for the buildings I designed, not the man I was dating, but I loved him. Or rather, I loved the man I had convinced myself he was. I kept hoping he would change, that the ambitious drive that had drawn me to him had not completely consumed him. I told myself that once he achieved his next goal, secured his next position, he would relax. He would be the man who had listened so intently to my dreams at that gala. It was a massive, heartbreaking miscalculation. The man I loved did not exist. I had built him in my mind, a fantasy structure with no foundation, the truth, the real Cameron, was the man who had invited me to my own public execution, the man who had traded me in for a newer, softer, more compliant model. This city, Manhattan, is a beautiful, hungry beast. It is a place of dizzying heights and crushing lows where everyone is calculating. Every dinner is a negotiation, every friendship an alliance. It is a city of ambition, and in the shadows of those towering skyscrapers, a different kind of power festers. It was a power I knew of only through whispers and headlines, a power that did not bother with the polite fiction of politics. It was the underworld, the hidden wiring of the city. And at the center of that web sat one man, Thomas D'Angelo. His name was never linked to Cameron's world, not directly. Cameron dealt in photo opportunities and press releases. D'Angelo dealt in shipping containers, construction unions, and silent, binding agreements. He was a myth, a ghost. People said he owned half the politicians Cameron was so desperate to impress. They said he could make a building rise or make a man disappear with a single, quiet phone call. He was spoken of as a man of immense control, a chess master who saw the entire board while everyone else was just looking at their next move. He was nothing like Cameron's polished, manicured circle. He was rumored to be ruthless, a man forged in some unknown, violent past that had left him cold and unbreakable. He was the true, dark heart of New York power. He was the man who had just stepped out of the shadows and into the blazing light of the ballroom. The man who had looked at my utter desolation, at Cameron's petty triumph, and decided, in that instant, to shatter the entire game board. He was the man whose ring was now a cold, heavy promise on my finger. A promise of what? I could not begin to imagine. I had escaped Cameron's polished cage, only to be claimed by the most dangerous predator in the jungle. Thomas D'Angelo did not release my hand. His grip was a manacle of warm steel. He held my hand aloft, the diamond catching the frantic, popping flashes of a dozen cameras, turning the light into a weapon. He looked once at Cameron, a look of such profound, cold dismissal that I saw Cameron physically recoil. He had been rendered utterly irrelevant in his own ballroom. "My fiancé needs some air," Thomas announced to the room at large. His voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner, silencing the roar of whispers. It was not a request. It was a decree. He turned, pulling me with him. I moved as if in a dream, my legs numb. He did not look back. I did not look back. I kept my head high, my eyes fixed on the massive oak doors he had entered. The crowd did not just part for him. They practically flattened themselves against the walls. I heard my name being called. A frantic, desperate shout. "Alyssa!" It was Cameron. His voice was tight with panic. Thomas D'Angelo did not slow his pace by even a fraction of a second. He simply continued to walk, towing me in his wake, as if the sound was nothing more than an annoying insect. We reached the doors. A man in a dark suit, built like a refrigerator, materialized from the wall and pulled one side open. We stepped out into the grand hallway. The noise of the party was instantly muffled. Another, identical man held an elevator, the doors standing open, waiting. We stepped inside. The doors closed, encasing us in a small, silent box of polished bronze and dark wood. I finally let out the breath I had been holding. It came out as a ragged gasp. I leaned against the wall, the adrenaline beginning to drain, leaving a terrifying, shaking void. He stood opposite me, watching. His face was unreadable. In the close confines of the elevator, he was overwhelming. He was all broad shoulders and contained power. He said nothing. He just watched me, his dark eyes seeming to strip away every layer of my composure. I started, my voice a hoarse croak. "What did you just do?" "I proposed," he said simply, as if discussing the weather. "You are insane," I whispered, pressing my free hand to my trembling lips. You cannot just walk in and claim a person." "I can," he replied. There was no arrogance in his tone. It was a simple, brutal statement of fact. The elevator doors opened onto a subterranean parking garage, starkly lit by fluorescent tubes. A black sedan, long and sleek as a panther, was waiting. The engine was already running. A driver stood by the open rear door. Thomas D'Angelo gestured with his head. "Get in!" I hesitated for only a second. The alternative was walking back into that ballroom. Back to Cameron. Back to the pit of my humiliation. I slid into the buttery leather interior. He followed, settling beside me. The door closed with a heavy, final thunk. The car pulled away smoothly, ascending a ramp and bursting out onto the wet, glittering streets of Manhattan. We drove in silence for 10, maybe 15 minutes. The city lights smeared past the tinted windows. I stared at the ring on my finger. It felt like it was burning my skin. It was a brand. The car slowed, turning into a private, guarded entrance of a towering black glass building in Tribeca. We descended again, into another secure garage. The elevator here opened directly into an apartment. No. Apartment was the wrong word. It was a palace in the sky, a massive, 2-story space enclosed in glass, offering a 180-degree view of the entire city. The lights of Manhattan glittered below us like a carpet of fallen stars. The decor was minimal, masculine, shades of charcoal, black and cream, no clutter, no personal effects. It was as beautiful and as cold as he was. He walked to the massive window, his back to me. "Take off the dress." My heart stopped. "What?" He turned, one eyebrow slightly raised. "It is covered in his failure. I do not want it in my home. There is a closet through that door. You will find a robe." I looked down at the crimson silk. He was right. It was the dress I had worn to impress Cameron, to remind him of what he had. It was a joke. I felt a sudden, violent revulsion for it. Without a word, I walked to the door he had indicated. It opened into a bedroom larger than my entire apartment. Beyond that was a closet. Not a closet, a showroom, filled with women's clothing, dresses, suits, shoes, all exquisite, all new, all in my size. The chilling realization that this had been prepared washed over me. I ignored it all, found a simple black silk robe, and stripped off the red dress. I left it on the floor, a pool of shed skin. When I returned to the main room, he was pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid. He handed one to me. "Scotch," he said. I took it. The liquid burned its way down my throat, stealing what was left of my breath but steadying my hands. "All right," I said, my voice stronger now. "You have had your dramatic moment. What is this? What do you want? This is not a proposal. It is an abduction." "It is a business transaction, Miss Price," he said, taking a small sip from his own glass. He gestured to the city outside. "This town is built on transactions. You should know that. You were, until an hour ago, part of one." Cameron and I started defensively. "Cameron and you were a political arrangement." "No," he interrupted, his voice cutting. "He used your talent, your face, and your name to make himself look respectable. You were a means to an end. The arrangement ceased to be useful to him. He terminated it in a distasteful manner." My face burned. "You do not know anything about us." "I know everything about Cameron Price. He saw my you, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop by 10 degrees. "I know he is weak. I know he is arrogant, and I know that he just made the single biggest mistake of his life, not by ending things with you, but by how he chose to do it." He paused, swirling the liquid in his glass. "He wanted to humiliate you. He wanted to break you in public, to show everyone that he was the one with the power, that he could discard someone like you and replace you with that." I flinched, the memory of Sophia's pale, triumphant face stinging me. The pain of it, the raw, public shame, came rushing back. I felt my eyes prickle with tears I refused to shed. I had stood there and taken it. I had let him do that to me. A cold, hard fury began to build in my stomach, overriding the fear, overriding the shock. Cameron had wanted to destroy me. He had wanted me to crawl away, broken. I would never give him that satisfaction. I looked up, meeting Thomas D'Angelo's dark gaze. And you, what do you get out of this? You saved me. Yes. Why? Do not mistake me. Alyssa, I did not save you, he said, his voice soft but sharp. I interrupted your execution. I am not a hero. I'm a pragmatist. I saw an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To own me. Am I your new prop? A flicker of something amusement respect passed through his eyes. You are many things, but I do not think you will ever be a prop. No, I require a wife, a woman of intelligence, of substance, of beauty. A woman who can stand next to me in rooms filled with powerful people and not just hold her own, but command respect. A woman like you. A contract, I breathed, the pieces clicking into place. You are proposing a contract. Precisamente, he said. A marriage, in name, a partnership, in practice. You will have my name. You will have my protection. You will have access to wealth you cannot imagine. You will never be humiliated by a weak little boy like Cameron Price again. Your word will be law. Your enemies will be my enemies. And in return, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. In return, he said, stepping closer, you will be Mrs. D'Angelo. You will be loyal. You will be discreet. You will stand by my side when I require it, and you will never, ever lie to me. My world is built on delicate arrangements. Trust is the only currency that matters. This was insane. He was a mafia boss. He was offering me a golden cage, a life built on secrets and, undoubtedly, violence. I should have been terrified. I should have run. But where would I run? Back to my empty apartment, back to my job on Monday, where I would be the subject of pitying whispers and cruel jokes, back to a life where Cameron Price still existed, still triumphant. Thomas D'Angelo had offered me an escape. No, not an escape, a weapon. The decision was not based on logic. It was not based on safety. It was not, God forbid, based on love. It was a cold, pure calculation. It was a choice born from the ashes of my humiliation. Cameron had tried to reduce me to nothing. But this man, this dangerous, powerful man, was offering me a way to become everything. He was offering me a front row seat to Cameron's destruction. He was offering me sweet, undeniable revenge. I would not be controlled by Cameron ever again. I would not be his victim. I looked at the ring on my finger. It was no longer a brand. It was a key. It was the beginning of a life I had never asked for, but one that I would now seize with both hands. I raised my chin, meeting his intense gaze. All right, Mr. D'Angelo, I said, my voice cold and clear. You have a deal. I will be your wife. My new life began with silence, not the familiar, distant roar of Manhattan traffic I was used to, but a heavy, insulated quiet that felt as expensive as the air I was breathing. I opened my eyes, disoriented. The sun was a brilliant, blinding sheet, pouring through windows that seemed to span the entire eastern seaboard. For one heart-stopping second, I believed the ballroom, the red dress, the humiliation had all been a suffocating nightmare. Then I moved my left hand. The ring was there. A cold, magnificent weight. It was not a dream. It was a transaction. Thomas D'Angelo was gone. The penthouse was empty, but his presence lingered in the stillness, in the absolute control of the environment. I found my clutch bag from the night before. My phone was inside. I powered it on. The screen exploded. 34 missed calls from Cameron, 22 from my office, a dozen from friends who had seen the photos that were undoubtedly plastered across every gossip site. Beside my bag, on the black marble kitchen island, sat a new phone. It was sleek, dark, and had no discernible branding. It was a tool. I was inspecting it when a woman let herself into the penthouse. She was in her late 20s, impeccably dressed in a gray sheath dress, and she had Thomas's unreadable dark eyes. Alyssa Price, she said. It was not a question. Her voice was brisk. "All business. I am Lucia D'Angelo. My brother sent me. We have a great deal of work to do." Lucia, I would learn, was the logistical engine of the D'Angelo empire. She was the one who made the fortress walls invisible but impenetrable. In the next 48 hours, she dismantled my old life with terrifying efficiency. My lease was terminated, the penalty paid in cash. My resignation was delivered to my firm, effective immediately. My belongings were sorted, with most of it deemed unsuitable and sent to storage. A curated selection of my personal effects, mostly books and my architectural drafts, appeared in the massive walk-in closet upstairs, alongside a wardrobe that looked like it had been stripped directly from Fifth Avenue. I was being erased. I was being rebuilt as Mrs. D'Angelo. Thomas returned on the third night. I was standing at the window, watching the city lights flicker to life. I had not left the penthouse. I was a bird in a magnificent cage. "You are adjusting," he stated. He did not ask. I turned. "You are isolating me. Is this part of the contract? Am I your prisoner?" He loosened his tie, his eyes never leaving mine. "You are my wife. My wife does not get harassed by her former employer or her pathetic ex-fiancé. You are being protected." "You did not just protect me, Thomas. You erased me, my job, my apartment, my life." "Your life," he said, walking closer, "was just publicly imploded. I am giving you a new one, a better one." He stopped, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. "You asked me why I did it. You think it was just about Cameron Price. That was a satisfying but minor bonus." He motioned to the city below. "My business is changing. Alyssa, I am moving out of the shadows. I'm acquiring assets that operate in the daylight, real estate, own political influence, technology. To the men I need to deal with, the ones who run this city in the open. I am a necessary evil, a brute they use, but one they would never invite into their homes." He looked at me then, his gaze intense. "But a man with a wife like you, changes things. Alyssa Price, the brilliant architect, a woman of class, of intellect, of indisputable talent. You are not just a wife, Alyssa. You are a statement. You make me legitimate. You make me look stable, civilized. You are the face of my dynasty." The bitterness rose in my throat, hot and sharp. "So I'm a prop again. I just traded one political user for another." A flicker of anger flashed in his eyes. So fast I almost missed it. "Do not compare me to him. He used you as a shield. I am using you as a crown. He made you smaller so he could look bigger. I am making you a queen so they will bow to us both. My enemies expect me to be alone. They see a lone wolf. They do not know how to fight a king and queen. You are my most valuable asset, Alyssa, and I protect my assets." The first test came a week later, a gala for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Lucia had dressed me, not in defiant red, but in a deep, midnight blue gown that clung to every curve. It was elegant, powerful, and understated. The diamond on my finger was the only weapon I needed. When I was with Cameron, entering a room meant a polite ripple of interest. Entering with Thomas D'Angelo was like parting the sea. A hush fell. The air crackled. People did not just look, they stared, a mixture of terror and fawning curiosity. He held my hand, his grip possessive, resting it in the crook of his arm. We saw them almost immediately. Cameron and Sophia. Cameron, when he laid eyes on me, looked like he had seen a ghost. He physically stumbled. Sophia, beside him, just looked small. Cameron started toward us, his face pale and desperate. He looked like he wanted to explain, to beg. Thomas did not even grant him a glance. He simply turned his shoulders slightly, a subtle movement that put his body between me and Cameron. It was a clear, brutal dismissal. Cameron stopped dead, his mouth open. He was nothing. He was a fly, and Thomas was the mountain. But as the night wore on, I saw the other side of this new world. I saw the men who did not look afraid of Thomas. They looked competitive. Older men, with expensive suits and cold eyes, his rivals, the other families. One of them approached, a man named Marco Falcone. He smiled, a thin reptilian expression. "Thomas, a surprise. We did not take you for the marrying kind." His eyes slid to me, assessing me like I was a racehorse. "And Miss Price, a spectacular choice. You have just given your enemies a very beautiful target." My blood ran cold. Thomas smiled back, equally cold. "She's not a target. Marco, she's a fortress, and you know what happens to men who try to breach my walls." Falcone's smile faltered. He nodded once and moved away. I was a pawn. I saw it clearly. To Cameron, I had been a political pawn, easily sacrificed. To Thomas, I was a strategic one, to be defended at all costs, but a pawn nonetheless. The danger was not always so overt. Later, a United States senator, a man I knew Cameron had been desperate to impress, cornered me by the bar. "Mrs. D'Angelo," he said, his voice smooth and condescending, "I was a great admirer of your work, especially your proposed redesign for the new city library. A tragedy it is being held up by so many. Zoning complications? This was news to me. The library was my passion project. Complications, I was not aware of any." "Oh yes," he smiled. "It seems your new association has caused the board to reconsider the optics." He was threatening my work, my legacy. Before I could respond, Thomas was at my side. His hand found the small of my back, a simple gesture that felt like a shield. "Senator," Thomas said, his voice dangerously quiet, "it is good to see you. I was just reviewing the construction contracts for the new arena in your district, the ones your brother-in-law's company is bidding on. There seem to be many irregularities." The senator's smile froze and shattered. The color drained from his face. "I am sure," Thomas continued, "that just as the zoning board will find they made a mistake with the library, I will find my accountants were mistaken about your brother." The senator stared at Thomas, his eyes wide with panic. He swallowed. "I will make some calls, immediately. It has been a pleasure. Mrs. D'Angelo." He fled. We were in the armored sedan, moving silently through the night. Before I spoke, my heart was hammering. He was trying to destroy my project. "He was trying to see if I would let him," Thomas said, staring out the window. "He was testing my influence." "You destroyed him in 10 seconds, I whispered. "He threatened you," Thomas said, turning his gaze to me. The darkness in the car hid his expression, but his voice was absolute. "No one threatens you. No one touches your work. No one harms what is mine. That is the contract." I looked at him, really looked at him. Cameron, when faced with even the slightest political inconvenience, had always asked me to be smaller, to be quieter, to compromise. He would have asked me to abandon the library project to save his reputation. Thomas had just declared war on a sitting senator to protect my design. It was the most terrifying, ruthless, and profoundly protective thing anyone had ever done for me. The contract I had made was supposed to be about revenge. It was supposed to be cold. But as I sat there, watching the lights of the city streak by, I felt a warmth spreading through my chest, a hot, dangerous feeling I had not anticipated. It was admiration, and it was terrifyingly close to something else. I was falling for the man who had bought me. The feeling of admiration was a dangerous, volatile thing. It settled into my bones over the following weeks, a warmth that had nothing to do with the contract I had signed. My life, which I had feared would become a gilded cage, instead became a fortress. Thomas had been true to his word. My library project was not just reinstated, it was celebrated. He had personally funded a new wing, and the Alyssa Price Pavilion was now the centerpiece of the city's new cultural push. I had my own office in his penthouse, a vast space of glass and steel overlooking the river. Where I worked on my designs, he would often sit in a low armchair for an hour, sipping scotch, just watching me draw, and he said nothing, but his presence was a heavy, grounding force. He was ruthless. Yes, I saw the men who came and went, men with hard eyes and scarred knuckles. I heard the quiet, coded conversations Lucia had on her encrypted phone. I was not naive. I knew my husband was a king in a world of violence. But with me, he was different. He was protective to a degree that was suffocating, yet profoundly reassuring. He never asked me to be less than what I was. He seemed to glory in my intelligence, in my fire. When I challenged him, which I did often, his eyes would light up, as if he had been waiting for an opponent worthy of his time. This was not the thin, hollow relationship I had shared with Cameron. This was something forged in iron and fire. The threat, when it came, was not a whisper. It was an explosion. Marco Falcone had been quiet for too long. He had not forgiven Thomas for the public humiliation at the Met Gala. He saw Thomas's move toward legitimacy, the library, the political donations, as weakness, an attempt to scrub the blood from his name. He thinks you are a distraction. Lucia told me one evening. We were in the penthouse gym. Her voice was strained as she rhythmically punched a heavy bag. He thinks my brother is spending too much time playing house and not enough time watching his back. The other families are listening. They smell instability. Thomas is not weak, I said, pausing my own workout. He is in love, Lucia shot back, not looking at me. To men like Falcone, that is the same thing. It is a liability, a leverage point. She finally stopped, breathing heavily. Tonight is the groundbreaking gala for your library, Alyssa. It is Thomas's grand gesture of legitimacy. It is everything he is building, and it is the perfect place for an enemy to tear it all down. A chill went down my spine. You think Falcone will try something? Tonight it is a public event. There will be senators, the mayor. That is exactly why he will, Lucia said. To destroy Thomas in front of the very people he is trying to impress. To show them he is still just a gangster who cannot even protect his own wife. The grand hall of the old library was magnificent. We had kept the original 19th century stonework, the soaring arched ceilings, and integrated them with a new structure of floating glass walkways and steel beams. It was my masterpiece. It was a bridge between the past and the future. Thomas stood beside me, his hand warm and firm on the small of my back. He looked every bit the philanthropist, the city patron, in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. But I could feel the tension humming through him. His eyes were not on the mayor, who was droning on at the podium. They were scanning the crowd, the exits, the high balconies. "You look beautiful, Alyssa," he murmured, his lips close to my ear. "This building. It is you. Strong, smart, uncompromising." "Thomas," Lucia said, I know." He cut me off, his voice flat. "Do not worry. My men are everywhere. This place is locked down." The first sign of trouble was the silence. The mayor stopped speaking mid-sentence. The microphone gave a sharp squeal of feedback, and then nothing. The lights in the main hall flickered, dimmed, and then died, plunging the vast space into near darkness, lit only by the emergency exit signs and the faint blue light of the city outsea. A woman screamed. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. "Thomas," I whispered, reaching for him in the dark. His hand clamped around my arm like a vice. "Lucia," he yelled. The sound of the main doors slamming shut was like a cannon shot, echoing through the hall. Then, new lights flickered on, harsh, industrial floodlights positioned on the balconies, blinding us. Men were swarming in from the side entrances. They were not Thomas's men. They wore black tactical gear, their faces obscured by masks. They were armed. "Nobody move," a voice boomed, amplified by a megaphone. I saw Marco Falcone step onto the main stage, pushing the terrified mayor aside. He had a microphone. He smiled, a wide, predatory grin that showed all his teeth. "Thomas D'Angelo," he called out, and no, his voice echoing. "My friend, you have built a beautiful place, a monument. I thought it was only fitting to turn it into your tomb." Panic erupted. People screamed, surging toward the exits, only to find them blocked by Falcone's men. Thomas pulled me behind a massive stone pillar, shielding me with his body. "They cut the main grid," Thomas hissed to one of his own men, who had materialized beside us. "They have the exits. They own the building." My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would burst. My mind was racing. They own the building. No, they did not. I did. I knew every stone, every wire, every hidden flaw. "No, they do not, I said, grabbing his arm. He looked at me, his eyes dark with a controlled fury. "Alyssa, this is not—" "I know this building," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "I know it better than they do. The original plans, from 1905. I memorized them. There is a flaw." "A flaw?" "Not a flaw, a secret. When they built the new foundation, they had to bypass the old 19th century steam tunnels. They are still there. They are right under our feet. The city archives said they were sealed with concrete in 1950. "So they are useless," Thomas said, his attention on two of Falcone's men moving toward our position. "No," I insisted. They were wrong. They only sealed the main junction. The blueprints showed a secondary access point, a maintenance conduit. It is in the sub-basement. It connects to the old boiler house, 3 blocks from here. They will not be guarding it. They do not know it exists." His eyes locked on mine. He saw the certainty. He nodded once. "Where?" "The original archive vault, the one we walled off behind the new exhibit." "Get us there." He moved, pulling me with him. It was a blur of violence. He did not move like a philanthropist. He moved like the predator he was. He took down the 2 men with a brutal, economical efficiency that made me sick to my stomach, yet left me breathless. We reached a service door, slipping through it just as gunfire erupted in the main hall. We were in the dark, in the stark, concrete corridors of the building's guts. We ran, down 2 flights of stairs, into the sub-basement. It was cold and smelled of damp earth and old paper. "It is here," I said, running my hands along a new, smooth drywall panel. "Behind this." Thomas did not hesitate. He slammed his shoulder into the wall, punching a hole through it. He tore the drywall away, revealing the old, heavy steel of the original archive vault. "The tunnel entrance is not the main door," I said, moving past him. "It is a pressure hatch for the old ventilation. It is on the side." My fingers found it, a small, recessed iron wheel hidden in the stone. It was rusted shut. "I cannot turn it," I gasped, pulling with all my weight. Thomas pushed me aside. He put his hands on the wheel. His muscles bunched under his suit. He grunted a low, animal sound of pure exertion. The metal groaned, screeched, and then, with a sharp crack, the wheel turned. A round, dark hole was revealed. The smell of cold, dead air rushed out. "Lucia," Thomas said into a small radio, "we are in the South Sub-Archive. Get everyone out through the old steam tunnel. Go now." "We are not all going to fit," I said, looking at the narrow opening. "You and Lucia go first." "No." I grabbed his suit jacket. "This is not just an escape. This is a weapon. Falcone has the whole building wired. He thinks he controls it." "He does," Thomas said grimly. "No," I said, my mind flying. "He controls the new systems, the ones I designed, the ones I put in. But he is in the old hall. He is standing on a floor that was never meant to hold that much weight. The main arch. It is compromised. We were supposed to install the new supports after the gala. Right now, it is held up by temporary steel shoring. Shoring that is bolted into this very wall." Thomas looked at me. His expression was one I had never seen before. It was raw, stark awe. "Where?" I pointed to a series of massive, new steel bolts in the concrete above our heads. "That is the anchor point if it gives. The temporary shoring in the hall above us fails." "How much to make it give?" he asked. "More than we have." "No," he said. He looked back down the corridor. Footsteps, shouts, they had been followed. "We have them." He pulled a small, explosive charge from his pocket. "Falcone's men are clumsy. This dropped from one of them." Thomas, if that goes, the whole floor could go, I said, my voice trembling. He's right above us, so, Thomas said. He wanted a tomb. I will give him one. He shoved me toward the tunnel. Get in, now, Alyssa. I am not... That is an order, he roared. He kissed me, a hard, brutal kiss that tasted of gunpowder and desperation. Go! He pushed me into the darkness. I stumbled, and Lucia's hands caught me, pulling me deeper. I looked back. Thomas was setting the charge against the bolts. Falcone appeared at the end of the corridor, flanked by his men. He raised his weapon. D'Angelo. For you, Marco, Thomas sneered. He triggered the detonator and dove into the tunnel, grabbing me, covering my body with his own. The world ended. The explosion was not a bang. It was a deep, guttural roar, a physical force that punched the air from my lungs. The ground heaved, the sound of 1,000 tons of stone and steel screaming in protest, groaning, and then collapsing, was the loudest thing I had ever heard. The tunnel filled with dust, choking us, blinding us. We were in the dark. Silence fell, absolute and terrifying. Thomas, I choked, tasting concrete. Thomas... A hand gripped mine. A body shifted. He was breathing, raggedly. I am here. He was alive. We crawled through the darkness, through a century of dust, until we burst out into a cold, dark alleyway, blocks away. The night air was sharp. In the distance, we could hear a different sound. Not gunfire, not explosions, sirens, 100 sirens, all converging on the library. Thomas leaned against the brick wall, pulling me against his chest. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. He was bleeding from a cut over his eye. His suit was ruined. He was covered in dust. He just held me, his arms like steel bands. He did not say anything for a long time. He just breathed me in. Finally, he pushed me back, just enough to look at my face. His dark eyes were blazing. You were magnificent, he whispered, his voice rough. You used your mind like a weapon. You brought down the whole damned ceiling. He was trapped. I whispered back, Falcone, he is gone, Thomas said. He and his entire crew, buried under your masterpiece. He made the mistake of thinking this. He tapped my temple. Was just for show. He did not realize it was the sharpest blade in the room. He pulled me back against him. The contract is over, Alyssa. This was not business. This was real. You are my wife. You are my queen. And you just won the war. We stood in the alley for a long time, the dust settling around us, the sound of distant sirens growing louder, like a wave rushing toward the shore. My ears were ringing. Thomas held me against his chest, his arms locked around me. His body was a solid, unmoving wall of heat and muscle in the cold night air. I was shaking, a deep, uncontrollable tremor that started in my bones. He was breathing hard, his face buried in my hair. You're safe, he murmured, his voice rough. You are safe. The words he had spoken before the explosion echoed in my head. You just won the war. I did not feel like a victor. I felt hollowed out, scoured clean by adrenaline and terror. I had brought a building down. I had used my knowledge, my creation as a weapon. Lucia's black sedan slid into the mouth of the alley, its headlights cutting through the dusty darkness. She did not get out. The back door opened. Thomas pulled me inside, climbing in after me. Lucia did not ask a single question. She just drove, her face a pale, grim mask in the dashboard lights. The ride back to the penthouse was silent. The city outside was alive with the sound of the emergency, but inside the car, the quiet was absolute. It was a different silence than the one I had shared with Thomas before. It was not the quiet of strangers bound by a contract. It was the shared, stunned silence of two people who had just walked through a fire and come out the other side. The penthouse was just as we had left it, pristine and impossibly calm. The city lights glittered below, oblivious. I stood in the middle of the vast living room, covered in concrete dust and grime. Thomas was a wreck. His tuxedo was torn, and the cut over his eye was bleeding freely now, a dark track down his temple. He looked at me, his dark eyes intense, cataloging every inch of me, searching for injuries. "Go," he said, his voice quiet. "Wash this night off you." I nodded, my legs feeling like lead. In the white marble bathroom, I stared at the woman in the mirror. She was a stranger. Her hair was matted with dust, her face streaked with soot. Only her eyes were recognizable, wide and bright with shock. The contract wife was gone. The architect was gone. This woman, she was someone new, someone forged in that tunnel. When I came out, wrapped in a thick robe, my hair damp, Thomas was standing by the window. He had shed his ruined jacket and tie. He had a glass of scotch in his hand and a fresh, angry gash on his forearm that I had not seen before. He had not cleaned the blood from his face. "The news is already calling it a gas explosion," he said, without turning. "A faulty pipe from the original foundation. A terrible, unavoidable tragedy." "You knew this would happen," I whispered. "You had a story ready." "You always have a story ready. Alyssa," he said, finally turning to face me. "In my world, the truth is just the story that gets told the loudest. Falcone planned to kill 100 people, including the mayor, and pin it on me. He planned to make it look like one of my operations had gone wrong. He would have been the hero who tried to stop it. Instead, he was the victim of a tragic accident." He walked over to me. Setting his drink down, he gently tilted my chin up, his thumb brushing away a smudge of soot I had missed. "He is gone. His entire inner circle is gone. You did not just win a war, Alyssa. You ended one." "I destroyed my library," I whispered, the weight of it finally hitting me. "My masterpiece. It is rubble." "It was a building," he said, his voice soft. "I will give you the money to build 10 more. You saved my life. You saved Lucia's life. You saved my men." "That was not in the contract," I said, my voice trembling. "Protection, loyalty, discretion. That was the deal. Not this. Not demolition. Not killing." "The contract is over," he said, his voice flat and final. "It has been over for weeks. This," he gestured between us, "is not a transaction. I told you that you were a queen. Tonight, you proved it. Falcone thought you were my weakness. He did not realize you were my sword." He stepped back. "The world is different now, Alyssa. Falcone's empire is shattered. There is a vacuum. The other families, they will be scrambling." The next few days were a blur. The city was in mourning for the victims of the library tragedy. There was a public funeral. Thomas and I attended. We stood in the front row. He looked like a grieving benefactor. I looked like the devastated architect, mourning her creation. I saw Cameron Price in the crowd. He was standing far in the back, alone. He looked pale and insignificant. He looked at me, his eyes full of a new, horrifying understanding. He was not looking at his ex-fiancée. He was looking at the woman who had stood beside Thomas D'Angelo as a rival family was wiped from the earth. He looked terrified. The reality of our new life settled in. The power Thomas held was no longer contested. He was not just a boss. He was the boss, the respect, the fear. It was absolute. Lucia was busier than ever, absorbing Falcone's territories, consolidating power. Thomas and I changed. The polite distance of our contract was gone, burned away in the explosion. We were a couple. We ate dinner together, not as a performance, but because we wanted to. We talked, not about terms, but about our days. I started designing again, not a library, but a new, secure headquarters for his operations, a true fortress disguised as a corporate tower. He trusted my mind completely. He began to open up, telling me small things about his past, about the father who had been cold and ruthless, about the mother he had adored. He was still a dangerous man. I never forgot that, but he was my dangerous man. I realized the love I felt for him was no longer a dangerous spark, but a deep, steady fire. It was a love that had been tested and proven. He had not just protected my work, he had seen me as a weapon, as an equal. He had not saved me from the fire. He had walked into it with me. But the new life came with new rules. We were stronger, but we were also a bigger target. The top of the mountain is a lonely, windy place. They are quiet. Lucia told me one afternoon, as we reviewed security protocols for the new building. The other families, they are all sending tribute. They are bowing. But do not mistake it for peace. Alyssa, it is respect, but it is also fear. And men who are afraid are dangerous. They are just waiting for one sign of weakness. That night, I stood with Thomas at the penthouse window, looking down at the city. It was a clear, cold night. The world looked peaceful. "You are quiet," he said, sliding his arms around my waist from behind, pulling me back against his chest. "I am just thinking," I said, "about how everything has changed. That party, Cameron, it feels like it happened 100 years ago, to a different person." "It did," he said, kissing my temple. "That woman is gone, and that man is gone." "I know," I said, "and I am not scared of this new life, Thomas. I am not scared of the danger. I am happy. And that feels more dangerous than anything else." He turned me in his arms, his dark eyes serious. "Then be happy, Alyssa. Be ridiculously happy. Because in our world, happiness is not something you are given. It is something you take. It is something you defend. And we are very good at defending what is ours." He kissed me, and it was not a contract. It was not a transaction. It was a promise. It was real. But as I closed my eyes, I knew, deep in my bones, that this peace was only temporary. It was a beautiful, stolen moment. And in our life, a moment was all you could ever count on. 6 months. 6 months since the night the library fell, burying Marco Falcone and his ambitions under a mountain of stone and my own broken dreams. 6 months of silence, of rebuilding. 6 months of becoming Mrs. D'Angelo in truth, not just in name. We returned to the Bellacourt ballroom. The crystal chandeliers still dripped light. The marble floors were still polished to a mirror shine. This was the room, the exact, precise location of my greatest humiliation. The place I had walked in, armored in a red dress, and been publicly discarded. Tonight. I was not wearing red. I wore a gown of deep, midnight blue, a color that spoke of the power of the ocean, of depth, of the night sky. The D'Angelo diamond on my finger was not a new, shocking weight. It felt as though it had grown from my very bone. This was not a public gala. The guests were not the bright, fleeting socialites and ambitious, hollow politicians. This was a private party. This was Thomas D'Angelo's inner circle, the heads of the other families, the ones who had wisely remained neutral during Falcone's power play, were here. They were older men, their faces maps of hard decisions. They watched me as I walked at Thomas's side, and there was no pity in their eyes. There was no curiosity. There was deference. They were not just looking at the boss's wife. They were looking at the woman who had helped end a war. Lucia was there, of course, a sleek, lethal shadow in black silk. She nodded to me, a rare, genuine smile touching her lips. "Alyssa, the room suits you better this time." "It is a different room, Lucia," I replied, and I meant it. Thomas held my hand, his grip warm and possessive. He had not left my side since the explosion. He had become tender. It was the only word I could find for it. The ruthless iron of his will was still there, but toward me. It had been reforged. He was fiercely protective, endlessly patient. He had funded the entire library reconstruction, which I was now redesigning from the ground up, making it stronger, better. He had poured millions into my projects, my name now attached to 3 of the city's most ambitious new structures. He had not just given me a shield, he had given me an arsenal. Halfway through the evening, The low hum of conversation stilled. Thomas, standing at the head of the room, tapped his whiskey glass with a spoon. The sound was small, but the silence it commanded was absolute. He looked out at the room, at the most powerful and dangerous men in the city. He did not look at them, he looked at me. "We are here tonight for one reason," he said, his voice a low rumble that filled the room. "To end all speculation, to draw a line in the sand." He paused, and I felt the air grow tight. 6 months ago, I came to this room. I made a public proposal. It was a contract, a transaction born of convenience. I heard a few quiet, indrawn breaths. No one dared to speak. "That contract is finished," he declared. The room was deathly still. It was terminated. It was voided in fire and dust, in a tunnel beneath a library. What you see here tonight is not a partnership. It is not an arrangement. He turned, taking my other hand, facing me fully. The entire underworld was watching, and he looked only at me. "This is my wife," he said, his voice softening, but losing none of its power. "This is my queen. She's not an asset. She's not a face. She's my equal. The loyalty I demand for myself, I demand for her. The respect I am owed, you will show to her. She is my heart, and she is my iron. Anyone in this room or outside of it who mistakes her kindness for weakness, who sees her as a target, who dares to disrespect her, will answer to me, and they will find that my response is final." He lifted my hand, the one with the ring, and kissed it. He did not kiss it like a gentleman. He kissed it like a king sealing a decree. The room erupted, not in polite applause, but in a thunderous, genuine ovation. Men were raising their glasses. This was not a celebration of love. It was a confirmation of power. They understood. The D'Angelo empire was not one man. It was two. "You did not have to do that," I whispered, my throat tight. "Yes, I did," he murmured back, his dark eyes blazing with an intensity that was just for me. "They had to see. They had to understand that you are not my weakness. You are my strength. The contract, that was just an excuse to get you. I think I knew it the second I saw you in that red dress. You were fire, and I just wanted to stand closer to it." He leaned in and kissed me, a slow, deep kiss that tasted of scotch and promises, a kiss that sealed the end of the contract and the beginning of everything else. Later, as the party swirled around us, a comfortable, respectful bubble of space left by our guests, Lucia approached. She held a small, sleek tablet. "Thomas, Alyssa," she said, her voice quiet. "The last of Falcone's shipping assets have been folded into our import business. It is finished." "Good," Thomas said, his arm tightening around my waist. "And one more thing," she said, a small, grim smile on her face. "I thought you might find this interesting. It just hit the newswire about an hour ago." She turned the tablet toward me. My heart stopped. It was a news alert, Sanowo Hardy, from a major financial paper. The headline was stark: "Cameron Price indicted on federal charges." I took the tablet, my fingers trembling slightly. I read the story. Cameron, my Cameron, the golden boy. He had been arrested by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The charges were staggering bribery, conspiracy, misuse of campaign funds, illegal lobbying. The article detailed how, over the last 6 months, his entire political infrastructure had collapsed. His major donors had pulled out, one by one, following the public tragedy at the library. His political allies had distanced themselves, left without his support system. He had become desperate, taking money from illegal sources, making stupid, reckless moves. He was ruined. The accompanying photograph was not the polished, smiling politician. It was a haggard, broken man in a wrinkled suit, his hands cuffed behind his back, being led from his townhouse. "He is gone," I whispered. I felt nothing. Not sadness, not triumph, just a cold, clean sense of an ending, a final door closing. I looked up at Thomas. "Did you do this?" He met my gaze, his expression honest. He shook his head once. "No, Alyssa, I did not have to. I never touched him. I told you, he is weak. Men like Cameron are parasites. They need to attach themselves to strength, to talent. You were his host, Alyssa. You were his foundation. When he publicly severed himself from you, he severed his own lifeline. When his allies saw you with me, they knew he was finished. He was no longer connected to power. He was an outcast. I simply let him fall. I handed the tablet back to Lucia. She nodded and melted back into the crowd. I looked away from the ghosts and at my husband, my partner, my king, the man who had walked into my public execution and handed me a crown, the man who had seen my mind as a weapon, not a threat. So it is over, I said, all of it. No, he said, pulling me toward the massive windows, away from the party, looking down at the glittering, cold lights of Manhattan. It is not over. It is just beginning. He put his hand over mine, our rings touching. He is gone. Falcone is gone. The past is gone. There is only this. Our city, our life, our empire. It is not going to be safe, Alyssa. It is not going to be easy, but it will be ours. I leaned my head against his shoulder, staring out at the kingdom he had built, the one he was now sharing with me. I was not the woman in the red dress. I was not the humiliated fiancée. I was not the contract wife. I was the queen. And I was finally, truly free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would absolutely love to hear from you. Please, let me know where you are listening from in the comments so we can all connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. It would also mean the world to me if you would support us further by hitting that hype button, so this story and others like it can be heard by even more people.